And it feels like hiring is just broken in many ways in a lot of different places, right? Like,
yeah.
I would say looking back at my last handful of years at Epic, I worked on some stuff that, really, like, all the big wigs from Capcom are there, and like all these movie stars, like there's Van Damme and like Ming-Na Wen and Kylie Minogue, and like they're all there.
Hey, Alan, how you doing tonight?
Good. Thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Great. Yeah, good to see you. It's been a while. So tell me, like, what part of the country are you calling in from?
Yeah, so East Coast, North Carolina, just outside of Raleigh.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that's a good spot. So cool. So tell me a little about your current title and role right now.
Sure. So I am the founder and CEO of Drill Creative Inc.
How did you transition into being a CEO? And you started this company on your own, right? Like, so how did this all happen? And
yeah. So, well, actually, it's myself and my partner. I have a co-founder, but yeah, I've been in the games industry for like 31 years now, something like that, and started out back in the early 90s doing like 2D animation and art.
Incredible Technologies, right? You were at AT.
That's right. Yeah, right. Yep. And in the Chicagoland area, and moved on to 3D and then technical art and I've done game design along the way, and anyway, done a lot of different things, and kind of over the course of the years, taken on different roles with more responsibility and leadership and all that stuff. So yeah, about a year or so ago, I was with Epic and I was working on the UEFN and creative mode. Right? So I helped ship that. I was leading a small team there.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, and so we shipped that, and then it was like this big rush up to GDC to have the reveal and the release and all this thing. And so after that, there was kind of like a realignment of initiatives and what have you. And I kind of found myself like looking for like the next thing that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so like I was bouncing around internally, kind of like helping out on different projects here and there. And I was just thinking like, I really just want to get back to making games. And, kind of as like this thought process was taking hold, come about like October of last year, there were layoffs at Epic that I was caught up in the layoffs. And I was like, well, no time like the present. So I spoke to the family and said, hey, look, this is a thing that's happened, and we might as well do this, right? So like, it's going to be okay. So like very next day, started the process of formulating the company and incorporating and doing all that.
Right.
So yeah, I handle all of the development and like creative direction and all that stuff, and then my partner handles like legal and accounting and all the the real important stuff.
And the UEFN engine is really powerful, right? Like it is. I remember being at GDC, seeing it. I'm like, wow, like you can make games within this game. Was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago it came out?
Yeah. So let's see. That would have been 23. It was
okay.
Yeah. Definitely powerful within some guardrails, I'll say, right? Like it's not the whole Unreal Engine, but it's got some pretty nice features and advantages to using it.
Okay. And then Drill Creative is kind of focused in that space, right? Like harnessing that and stuff and building games within that world.
Yeah, right. So, as part of Epic, when we were launching UEFN, one of the things that we did was we launched a map, one of the initial maps called Deserted Domination, right? And so it was, the intent of that was to really show like, hey, you can do stuff inside of Fortnite that doesn't necessarily look like Fortnite, right? So it had more of like this, more like realistic or believable, gritty kind of, look, right?
Right.
And, so in doing Drill Creative is like, well, I have experience with this tool. I was part of the team that helped launch it.
Right.
And as a person just starting out without like a whole team of programmers and artists and whatever, there's a lot that UEFN provides right out of the box that kind of gets you over that hurdle, right? So
totally.
They have devices that, are kind of like these packaged up, bundles of functionality, right? So like if you want to make a game with the storm, like VR, then, you just drop the storm in there. And that sort of thing. Right. So it seemed like a pretty interesting way to start a new company. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, with for small teams, and just the potential, like the size of the audience that's built into Fortnite in particular. Like,
totally,
there's however many millions of accounts, registered accounts there that are at your fingertips.
Look North is kind of in that same space too, if I remember right.
Yeah, totally.
Using the engine and having a smaller team and be able to build stuff within that entire space. So yeah, that's exciting, right? Like you're not like trying to go up against AAA or even AA with, having to have an army of a team and a burn rate that would, choke a horse and all that. Like you can be small and nimble and tap into this audience of millions of players. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I think, I liken the kind of the time frame that UGC and UEFN in particular is in right now is, in my mind, very similar to that time in the iPhone when the App Store just came out, right? Yeah. And so like you had all these early adopters and hobbyists going in there, like experimenting and doing wild things before like all the big boys came in and started sucking all the air out of the room, so to speak.
Yeah, and it was like the Wild West, because I've been in an iPhone since the beginning. It was like 07, 08, and it's like someone comes out with this goofy fart app and makes a bazillion dollars. You're like, what? Like, it's like they saw the potential and they tapped into the audience, and it's a much different world now. But what do you wish you had known about the game industry back when you started at Incredible Technologies?
Yeah. So
very different industry back then, but yeah.
Yeah, totally. That was coin op that I got started in. And I was pretty young when I got started. I was like 19 or 20 or something like that. Looking back, I think the biggest thing is I wish I had developed a better sense of empathy for maybe other people.
Also, just being able to understand what they're going through and stuff like that, you mean? Or?
Yeah, because, so like, games is what I wanted to do like my whole life. I can remember, Christmas of 82, we got Atari, and like the minute I plugged in Pitfall and saw that little dude running across the screen, I'm like,
you're just like,
that's what I want to do.
Right. Laser.
So, here I am, I got the gig, and, all my friends were away at college. I had nothing else going on. And so like, I just worked like nonstop. Like,
right.
I don't think I took a vacation for like the first 4 years that I was there.
Really?
I would sleep at the office and work just because that's what I wanted to do. So anyway, like working on these projects, and then like people would be going home at like 5 and 6 o'clock, and I'd be like, what the hell? Like,
right.
Where's your dedication? Right.
Right. Where's your passion, man? What the hell?
Yeah. Which, is looking back is pretty crappy. But, and I remember, my manager at the time was like, hey, I don't want to hear that. Like, you can't be talking like that. People have and I was just like, whatever. Like, I was, again, very young, very
full of piss and vinegar, young, right? Like, better. Yeah.
But, like over time, I think I've come to realize that, everyone has a different situation. I still like to work late at night and all that other stuff, but like, I don't expect anybody else to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's a personal choice, but you're not like, trying to drag people in and doing that kind of stuff too. Yeah. So what's your advice for someone looking to get their first job here in the game industry? Fast forward to 2024, right? It's
right.
Time again.
I think there are a lot of differences now, obviously, to 30 years ago. Like there weren't degrees that you could get. There weren't schools dedicated. There was no internet to go learn all this stuff. But
exactly.
I think a principle that is common is that you have to be able to show stuff, right? Like you're an artist, you show your art. Designer, you show your games. Engineer, you show your games, you show your code, whatever, right? There's like all these different, format or outlets for that stuff now, right? Like ArtStation for artists, and itch.io for designers, whatever. Right? It's a much bigger pool of candidates nowadays too, because there's all this information out there in these classes and courses, whatever.
Right.
So you have to be able to make yourself stand out and speak in depth about what you did and how you did it and why.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of like the nuts and bolts thing, but like,
I
was thinking about this, and I would say more like kind of high level or maybe philosophically, like this is a thing that I think I learned over the course of my career as well. Is like you have to be able to manufacture opportunity as well. Like I see so many people on social media, like, I've done all the applications, I spoke to this person, whatever, and like, I'm not getting anywhere. I've got all these rejections, and
Right.
Just like sitting at home and filling out forms is like not enough. Like, online application stuff, like it's not enough anymore.
Right.
And I really have come to believe, like, the more that you just do, the more that, like, you can cultivate luck, like just by doing stuff, right? Like
when preparation meets opportunity, that's the definition of luck, right? Like you got to do those two things.
Putting yourself out there, you never know who you're going to run into or what you're going to do. I mean, that's largely how even back then, that's how I got started, right? Like there's all these circumstances that kind of came together that allowed me to be in the right place at the right time to get in.
Yeah.
And I think that still holds today.
Yeah. You see too, like, oh, I've sent 1,400 applications. And I'm like, the market is giving you feedback, right? Like there's something with your resume. There's something with your portfolio. Like, and maybe you're applying for roles you're underqualified for, right? So like you have to go back and take stock, look in the mirror, figure out what's going on, figure out how can I make my portfolio better? How can I make my resume easier to understand and follow and highlight my experience with the job description and stuff like that? Yeah, because you see a lot of that, on online, social media, and LinkedIn and stuff. And it's like,
so you're in talent acquisition, right?
Yeah, I transferred into that 7 years ago from production. Okay. I've been reading resumes since the early 90s when I was hiring. All
right, so I'll be careful as to like not offend you or anything, but
go ahead. No.
I think that and it feels like hiring is just broken in many ways in a lot of different places, right? Like don't waste your time with online forms. Like it's just going to go nowhere. You're not going to make it past the automated filters, and you hear stories of people like,
oh, how to beat the ATS. You mean that kind of crap and stuff like that?
I hear stories like people like, oh, they have all these keywords and they put them in white on their does that work?
No. It's I mean, maybe there's some random company that does that, but it's like it's a human with a job description and then a resume, and they're just going through them and just kind of looking and seeing what the bullet points are and seeing if things are lining up, because they're just looking for a fit, right? Like you're just going, especially when you have like 50 or 75 resumes to go through. You're just like, all right, this one isn't a fit, on to the next. And I've heard it's like 17, 20 seconds sometimes to that first impression. So all these things about like these hidden words and what it's all bullshit. Like, and people, it's so frustrating, and I get so frustrated when I hear that, because I know that's out there, and I'm like, people don't listen to these people. They don't know what the F they're talking about, right? Like, it is not these tricks to beat the ATS, right? Like, you got to have the bullet points and the experience that line up with the job description and a portfolio at the top, and great work to look at. And if you're an artist, be an ArtStation, right? Like, I don't want some zip file. I don't want some G drive crap. Like, like, it's just, there's a lot of just kind of common sense things that maybe people don't know, but like, don't waste your time with the TikTokers and the influencer crap. It's just, sorry, I'm going to rant here, but
all good.
And it's a tough market too. Sorry. There are as many opportunities as there are. There's also so many more people applying, and we all know the industry's just gone through this horrific 2 years. So I post a job, and it's like a tsunami. Like when I turn a job on right now, so the bar just keeps getting higher and higher, and you've got to be hitting on those bullet points for what people are looking for, because they spend a lot of time crafting and thinking about the role and what they need and, what they're looking for. And, when you get a resume like, I'm a great product designer or a product manager, and it's a different job, you're just like, did you read the job description? Right? Like, on to the next, right? Like, goodbye, right? Like, so you really got to raise your game, because the competition is so high right now. And, and there are great schools, and when we came up, you're just kind of learning on the fly, right? I remember interviewing at Incredible Technologies way back in the day too. And what about somebody like in this industry right now that wants to kind of level up, go to that next stage? They're artists and they want to be a senior, or they want go from a senior to a lead in design or something like that? Like what kind of advice, would you like to share?
Yeah. Yes. I think for the independent contributors, right? Like it's pretty straightforward, right? Like,
yeah.
Improve your skills, show you can produce and, all of those types of things, to make the switch into more like leadership. I think historically in the games industry, it's like you show you could do all of those things of produce at a high level of quality.
Produce content, you're saying, not produce software as a producer, right? But make content, yeah.
And people start looking to you as a leader in that role, right? And then so many of us kind of just morphed into this role where you're like leading people, and then kind of like getting beyond that. Like I don't know that I have a whole lot of good advice other than I think particularly at larger organizations, like the people factor is like a huge thing, right? Like, the soft skills or whatever, like knowing how to act professionally and, make the right connections. I feel like I've been alternately lucky with that and then sometimes really poor at it as well, depending on the situation. So, like I said, I don't know that I have a whole lot of advice other than be aware of how organizations operate and be able to navigate that stuff, right?
And those core skills. And one of the things that I talked about in a previous show is kind of trying to drive your one-on-ones with your manager, like being like, hey, here's the stuff I want to talk about, here's what I'm doing, to show that initiative, and then to help kind of shape your career versus being kind of passive, like, oh no, I got to talk to the boss, every week or every 2 weeks, but kind of being proactive versus reactive, right?
For sure. Like, if that's what you want, then, you have to be able to communicate that effectively. Like, don't sit back and expect it to happen, then be upset when
right. And like, why didn't you read my mind? Like, I'm not a mind reader, right? You need to verbalize that, without being like, I want to jump 3 rungs and be the, VP next week. Like, no, right? That doesn't work that way. But but just be proactive about things and, work on those core skills, learn how to, communicate and not flip tables and all those kind of things.
And document too, right? Like a lot of organizations have like very explicit qualifications for what it takes to move from level to level. So like, target those things, work on that and document. So like come review time, you can say like, I did this. This is how it benefited the company. Like, this is the other thing I was doing,
Right. Yeah. And ask your manager kind of like, what does it take to get to that next stage, right? And figure out like, okay, I've got these 7 things, but I need these 10 things to get to the next step. I need to work on these 3, right? And those kind of things. I think those are important. The topic of change is a big thing. I'm always kind of curious about like, what's the biggest career change you've been through, which I think I know the answer, but like, what do you think?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, there's obviously this one, like starting my own studio and what have you, but but looking back, I think that, so again, like I started out in coin op and then went to console, and along the way, like I've done mobile and PC and AR and VR and all that. And then there's actually a period of time when I did casino gaming, slot machines. Right.
Okay.
Previously you mentioned Incredible Technologies doing that.
You were doing it at IT, not at WMS Gaming or Scientific. Okay. Yeah.
Right. So that was huge. And, to kind of tell that story. So when I was
a very different field too, because I spent about a year and a half at WMS Gaming, and I'm like, it's adjacent, but very different. So yeah.
Yeah. So early 2000s, I was at Midway, and WMS was right across the street, right? And they had started this slot thing. And, again, I hesitate to say this because this is young me again, but I
got plenty of young me stories. Don't worry about it.
I quite frankly like looked down on the whole slot thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
I'm a gamer. I want to make stuff where players are like,
that's for the blue hairs, whatever, man. I do the one-arm bandit bullshit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's no interactivity, and the technology is years and years behind, right? It's all 2D, like old school. So to be quite honest, like at the time, that was like when the PlayStation 2 generation came out, right? Like PlayStation 2 and Xbox or whatever. And
like 02 or 3, something like that.
Yeah. And Midway was transitioning from being a coin op developer to that. And it was hard. It was really hard.
Yeah.
And a number of people, just decided like, hey, that's enough. And they literally walked across the street and went to work on slots, right?
Right.
And so I saw that at the time, as like kind of like an admission of failure. Like, I can't hack it as a game. So so again, I hesitate. Like, I'm sorry to everybody, that did that back in the day. I didn't get it at the time.
Right.
Anyway, so flash forward, I'm back at Incredible Technologies, and I was doing coin op. They had spun up their casino gaming thing a few years before. Mm-hmm. And the owners had come to some of us coin op designers and said like, hey, can you come and have a shot at making a slot machine? And I'm just like,
right.
It's not really what I want to be doing. And, is this a career path and whatever? And gosh, but, I was like, what? I really felt like I owed it to Elaine and Richard and Larry.
Larry, yeah, right.
They gave me my shot during my first tour at Incredible Technologies, way back. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. So yeah.
And Gomez was there too, right? Was George there at the time?
Yeah, actually, that's right. Yeah, George Gomez was there as well.
Yeah,
right.
He was super talented. He did Tron, Spy Hunter, just some of the biggest fucking games in the world, right? Like I'm a fan and friend of George, and I'm always like, I'm not worthy Wayne's World. I think how many quarters I put into Spy Hunter as a high schooler.
I'm like, holy crap! I'm working with side by side with this guy that made Spy Hunter like that.
Right.
And Tron is like my second favorite arcade game of all time, right? And so, anyway, so that change was big, going from doing the coin op stuff to slot machines.
Right. Yeah, and it's a very different model, especially around design, right? Like.
Oh yeah.
And I learned that at WMS Games. It's like you got the pie, you got 100%. You got to figure out how to do base game and bonus, and what kind of player you're going after, and you're going to give them little wins, or just kind of drag it out for that big payoff. And those numbers got to add up to 100%, right? Because you can't have a machine paying 102.3%, and that's a whole nother world. And to the credit, to your point too, like I always kind of had that whatever thought, and then when I was exposed, I'm like, oh, now they're in Unity. I worked on this Price is Right game where we had monitors. We had 3 monitors. I organized a photo shoot with 2 of the models, and we had lights above the machines, and then there would be things going off, and all these different screens with the overlays going on. It wasn't the granny one-arm bandit thing. Right. Like it was super high production values, technology, networked games, all this kind of stuff. So it was a different world. Yeah,
even so though, like, I had come from working on like PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 games.
Okay.
Then going, back to coin op and then to slots, and like even the slots were more primitive, let's say, than the coin op hardware, which was several years behind PS3 and Xbox 360, right? Like, I think that first set of hardware for the slot machine is like it was all integrated graphics, so there was no video card in there. I think.
Oh, right.
There was no edit. We weren't using Unity. Everything was built in like 3D Studio Max and exported and done that way. So yeah, like that was part of that concern. Is like, man, this is like pretty primitive stuff, but ended up being very proud of what we did and accomplished, and actually it's something of a career highlight, like quite honestly, like some of those games that we made.
That's cool. So what are you curious about in the game industry right now?
Yeah, so obviously with Drill, we're in that UGC space, so that's kind of like occupying all my attention at the moment. There's a number of different platforms that, like Roblox has actually been around forever, right?
Yeah.
And then there's new UGC platforms springing up, like, is it Elsewhere? Is that what it's called? Everywhere? I'm sorry, look it up.
No, I'm not familiar with that one, but no, okay.
Yeah, it's a former Rockstar guy. Started it up, yeah. So like, I need to look at that, and there's a couple other ones as well. So, I think there's huge opportunities there. So like I said, that has my interest at the moment. I'm currently focusing on UEFN, but I need to start looking at Roblox soon here.
Those are the two big, in terms of UGC, those are the two big ones, I think, of Fortnite and Roblox. But yeah, that's cool to hear. There's other ones out there too, right?
You look at some of these other games that have been around for a while, some of these IP, right? Like traditional games that have been on consoles or whatever. And you look at kind of how they've morphed and evolved over time, where it's like, it's not just a single player experience and a multiplayer experience. It's like, there's a dozen different types of experiences within their launcher, right? And some of them seem to me to be like testing the waters with, different types of game modes. And I wonder if at some point some of these games that we've known for years are going to come out with their own tool sets. Like, well, for example, we've seen it a little bit with Halo and like Doom is the other one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
But I think there's some other games, some other huge games that, I don't have any insider knowledge on this, but just like looking at kind of the way things are going, I think there's going to be more of that. Like UGC is just going to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah. No, I totally do too.
I'm being. I apologize for being like super vague, but
no, it's fine. Yeah, but just as a trend, it totally makes sense, right? Like it is the future. Smaller teams, less insane budgets, and doing cool stuff to establish audiences and things like that. What about threats? Like, what are you concerned about? What are you like? Whoa, it's just effed up about X.
I guess it's not specific to UGC, but like I think we've seen in the past where you have these platform holders, whether they're software or even hardware platform holders that are making their tool sets available to developers. Like at that point, like the platform almost doesn't belong to you anymore, right? Like you've given it to somebody else to be creative and do what they want to do, right? And I think we've seen instances in the past where the platform holder holds the reins a bit too tightly, right? Yep. Whether it's with respect to like content or what have you, or even the features that are being developed for the platform. If those things are being held back for whatever reason, whether it's like legal concerns or branding concerns or whatever,
right?
I think that increases friction for the developer, and like at some point, if the friction becomes too great, you're going to lose the developers, and no one's making stuff for your stuff. It doesn't, right. That's not a strong signal, right?
Right, and you can't pay your way out of that hole, right? Like I've been in companies where you're just like, no one's supporting our hardware, hardly, i.e. TurboGrafx 16. So we'll just pay for a bunch of developers to make games, and unless you catch lightning in a bottle and have the greatest game in the world, it's not going to grow, because it's limited by how much your budget is and how much you can pay people, and maybe some of the games aren't that hot, and then what, right? So yeah, it has to get organic to grow, and not just pay to play with paying developers to make stuff on your platform.
That's like kind of like on the creative side, like a concern there. But the other concern I have for some of these platforms is monetization as well, right? Besides a few outliers of like some teams that are making millions of dollars, whatever, like the majority of folks, if they're making anything, it's like $100 here, $100 there, right? And it's like, that's awesome if you're 13 years old slapping together content, right?
Right.
But if they're serious about providing a platform where developers can make a sustainable business, then like platforms, these platform holders need to like make the right decisions to enable that.
Yeah, so you can create a sustainable business with a small team, and it's not just right for the 13-year-old, because otherwise, to
tie the monetization thing back to the policing part of it, right? Like
Hey, if you're finding this interesting, please click the like and subscribe button so the YouTube algorithms know and I can help spread the show. Thanks.
What's like one of the most valuable things a developer can do is create IP that's going to last, right?
Yeah, totally.
And if you're on a platform where whether it's content restrictions or feature restrictions of the tool set, and you cannot develop your own IP, like that doesn't send the signal that this is like really about, a sustainable business that allows a developer to cover costs and go beyond that, right?
Yeah, because bigger companies are lawyered up and they want to control the IP, but the IP is the incentive for the smaller. So then you have that friction there because, I know what you're saying there. What are your thoughts about AR, VR, MR? Because if I remember right, because we've known each other a long time, you were at Magic Leap at one time, right?
That's right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I was with Epic for a while, and then I left and went to Magic Leap for a couple of years.
Mhm.
And I was around there and helped out with the launch of the Magic Leap One.
Okay.
So yeah, did that. And then my time prior with Epic, I had done VR as well. So there's like the obvious things that everyone's aware of, like form factor and FOV
Right.
and all that stuff with VR, right? Like those things will be solved eventually. I mean, I think the biggest thing, once those obvious problems are solved, for me, there's still the issue of like motion sickness, right?
Yeah.
Until I think that's going to require some sort of new hardware far flung out into the future, right? That, I don't know, maybe you put a pad behind your ear and it stimulates your balance system, so in the right way, so that as you're moving, you're not getting sick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like just you hear a lot of the proponents of VR saying like, oh well, people will get used to sickness and all this stuff. I was like, no, it's
yeah.
I think within a band of applications, certain applications, VR is totally applicable and useful, right? Like so applications where you're largely stationary, right? Like that makes total sense to me, right? But as a game developer, I think we have this desire to explore worlds and move around and whatever.
Yeah.
Again, like until I think that motion sickness thing is like 100% eliminated, I'm not like super bullish on it just yet. Now, like I think AR gaming will probably come before we get that magical tech that does the VR motion sickness elimination. But there's some interface issues actually that need to be resolved with AR in particular, right? The assumption, or I guess the assumption is that people are going to wear AR equipment in some form, just like all around all the time, right?
An overlay on top of reality, right?
Right. But like walking around with a controller or some sort of input device to interact with that, like I don't think you're going to see mass adoption, right? My thought was eventually you're going to have to come up with like some sort of like AR sign language, right? Like some sort of standards for like, you're flicking your fingers and, you're communicating or you're interacting with the device and it's input device free.
Right.
I think that really needs to be solved in some fashion to see widespread gaming adoption at least.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's on the horizon, right? Just how far out is it, right? Like,
exactly. It'll be there eventually. I think the bigger concern for me is that AR is probably just going to rubbish itself with advertisement, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
There was some guy did like a video a few years back, and it was like, oh, I'm wearing my AR device. I'm walking down the street, and he's just being like assaulted by these virtual billboards that are popping up left and right, and it's like. You look at the state of the web on mobile, and like that's where that is today. It's like it's useless,
right? Especially
with the cost of these AR devices. Like they're going to have to subsidize it some way, and I fear it's going to be advertising. So I don't know.
Yeah, right. Like hardware's $3,000, so yeah, we're going to subsidize it with bombarding with ads, and then people are going to be like, overload, right? Like my phone's bad enough when I get stuff coming at me. It's like, I
hope I'm wrong, but that seems a trend.
What are your thoughts about AI, the $64,000 question?
Very controversial, right?
Definitely.
I get it's a very emotionally charged conversation, I guess.
Especially for artists.
Yeah, right. And like I kind of I get it. But also I think maybe I've just developed a different sort of understanding or maybe perception of how these things work, these language models and whatever. Is it really that much different than if you're an artist and you go to art school to study the masters, like you're learning about how the greats use form and lighting and
right, Da Vinci this or right,
and you're interpreting that and then putting your own spin on it. Like, is it really that much different than what these machines are? Like, what's the difference? Then like a machine can do it, infinitely faster, right?
Right.
So I don't know, but there's the people make the analogy of the camera didn't stop people from painting, or the printing press didn't stop people from writing, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'll say this: I think for anyone hoping that protesting is going to like put a stop to it, like it's already too late. It's AI is here,
right?
I spent the earlier part of the year traveling back and forth to the West Coast as we were starting up the company. and a lot of time in San Francisco. And it had been a couple of years since I'd been there because of COVID and what have you.
Yeah.
And so that first return trip, getting in the car and driving into San Francisco, and the billboards are it's all AI, AI this and AI provider that and whatever. Yeah. And then, you step out and there's a Waymo,
right. Just don't run me over.
Right. Yeah. Just like driving by, and like I rode in one, and it was like, it really felt like I was in Blade Runner, right? Like
you rode in a Waymo. Really? I've out here, I'm in the Midwest. I've not been in one. So yeah.
Yeah. Right. So like, I mean, they don't have them out here on the East Coast. Right. So that was like, San Francisco has just been like stepping into the future. Like like I said, it's already, right? So I think as much as people maybe have a distaste for it, I think that we're better off embracing it and learning to work with it, because the alternative is, if enough noise is made, the alternative is legislation, right? And then that technology is out of the hands of the people. And then the only people that are going to have it are like governmental organizations and criminals, basically, right?
Criminals, bad actors, yeah, right.
Yeah, so that's not. I don't think that's the best option. So.
Are you using it right now at all in kind of like your workflows and things you got going on and stuff like that? Or
so for all of that I just said, that sounds like I'm very pro AI. Like you're actually not using it in our day-to-day work.
Yeah,
I've experimented with it. I have a bunch of filters like on Instagram where like I watch a bunch and follow a bunch of AI people using AI.
Right.
I hesitate to say AI artists.
Right.
Because of the backlash, but let's say users.
Importers, right.
Yes. Yeah.
Prompters, right. Yeah. Prompt technicians.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, I find it like really fascinating. There's some amazing stuff that does get generated from it.
Mm-hmm.
But I like how soon we might dive into it. I'm not sure. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, that's fair. What's been one of your favorite projects over the scope of this huge career to work on?
Yeah, so like the slot machine King of Bling, that was a big one, kind of unexpected. But then, I would say looking back at my last handful of years at Epic, I worked on some stuff that really, really proud of. Really feel fortunate to have worked on. So like one of those was Valley of the Ancient. That was like the big demo for Nanite, for world partition features of Unreal Engine.
Uh-huh.
And so I got to do some work on the character. It was you're like this character in this desert environment, and you're running around, and you go through this portal, and the world changes, and then you fight like this huge metallic golem robot thing. And so I got to do gameplay stuff on that. I helped out with like the movement of the character and target acquisition, and lock on, and the HUD elements, and projectile trajectories and stuff. So like that was a lot of fun to work on. Really great team. That was awesome.
Cool. Yeah.
And then I'll say a few here. So then I got called on to the Matrix project that the special projects team was doing over there. So right at the very, very end, there was one scene that they needed somebody to basically come and help out. And so being called in to work on that, and inheriting this, like there was a lot of work that had kind of already been done and shelved for a while, and then coming back and inheriting that and trying to untangle it was a pretty big task. But again, the team was awesome. And so there was a lot of collaboration with like really great people that had to happen. And, a lot of late hours, which, I love that energy that you feed off of when there's a bunch of people working together. So that was good. And then, and then finally, right at the end there, so I was leading a team working in the UEFN space, and we were charged with developing features and content that would expand the capability of creators that were going to use the tool, right?
Okay.
So with a focus on gameplay, like particular like styles of gameplay and stuff. So that was great. Very proud of the Deserted Domination map that we did, and then we started working on the first person mode for Fortnite, and that was really exciting. That was super cool. We built a bunch of stuff too, but yeah, those are probably the big ones.
No, yeah, those are all definitely exciting. So what's a funny or odd story from working in the game industry that you'd like to share? I'm sure you got boatloads of them.
I'll go back to Incredible Technologies, my first tour there. I had kind of decided I wasn't going to talk about Street Fighter the movie anymore because I've talked about it so much over the years and everything. But yeah, I was involved with that project. But it was just it was such a crazy project, and it was so early in my career. And at the time, I thought like, this is great. I'm making games and like hanging out with movie stars, and doing all this. Like it's going to be like this forever, right? And like not necessarily, but the funny story from that was. So we had.
Did IT do? Wait a minute. Sorry, back up. But like, did IT? What did they do again specifically? I'm trying to remember.
Gosh, yeah. So let's see. This was around the time that Mortal Kombat had become hugely popular in the big fighting game craze. Early '90s, yeah.
Yeah.
And Capcom had been. I think they had put out like Street Fighter 2 and Champion Edition and Turbo and whatever, and then the Mortal Kombat comes out of nowhere essentially and just like decimates US arcades, right? Like it's all
totally, yeah.
And so Capcom wanted to, one of their American offices, and actually I think this came out of the guy that was running their Latin American offices, but they wanted to do a digitized Street Fighter because they had plans to do a Street Fighter actual movie for theater.
Oh, a digitized Street Fighter, really?
Yeah. And so IT actually had pretty awesome 2D hardware back at the time. Like it could do crazy amounts of colors. Like I don't remember the exact number, but like 128 palettes of 256 colors on screen at a time, or like, which is like unheard of. It was like
back at that time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And they had some experience doing digitized stuff with prior to me being there, they had done like rimrock and basketball, which was digitized stuff that was rotoscoped. So anyway, they came to, they wanted an American, as I understand it, Capcom wanted an American take on Street Fighter to, kind of get back into the American market.
Uh-huh.
And so they came to IT and said, okay, we're going to fly you guys over to Australia. That's where the second half of the movie's being filmed. And, we'll set you up with a studio and you guys are going to digitize these guys and make an arcade adaptation of Street Fighter the movie. So we did the whole thing, like planned out all the moves, worked with the costuming department on costumes. We, set up all the studio and stuff over there, whatever. So the funny part of the story is, so we get over to Australia and it's like 5 or 6 of us. And the very first night we're there's this huge dinner, right? And so Capcom's throwing this dinner. And we're sitting there and it's like all the big wigs from Capcom are there. And like all these movie stars, like there's Van Damme and like Ming-Na Wen and Kylie Minogue and like they're all there.
Right.
And, the video game nerds, we're all stuck in the back far table, right?
Right. So, the little table at Thanksgiving, right? They're the big table. We're at the
it's like
kitty table.
You're at the back, right?
Yeah, you're in the back.
And Kenjo Sugimoto is the president of Capcom, and he gets up there to say a few words and welcome everybody and whatever. And like he starts talking about, Street Fighter has made so many billions of dollars and worldwide phenomenon and blah 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 blah. And like I don't believe that the actors had any real sense of just how big Street Fighter was, and at that time. And so like you could hear the gears turning and like the dollar signs like
my contract. I better call my agent right now. Yeah.
And yes, many of them did, right? And so the original plan was we were going to be there for 2 weeks. When an actor was not on set for the movie, they would come up to see us for, I think we had specified like 6 hours or something.
Right.
And do these shoots. And a number of them did it, but then another number of them of like let's say the bigger stars, refused to do it.
Van Damme's probably, right? Those kind of things.
Yeah. And so it was, we ended up having to stay there for a month to try to everybody. And some of the actors, we didn't even get them in the studio in Australia. We had to fly them out to Chicago later and recreate our setup and do it there. So, that's kind of a story.
Yeah, I can just see them like, where's the payphone? Back in the day, like I'm calling my agent. I want a damn bigger cut. And I bet if I'm doing this game, I want a 5x whatever you signed for.
Right? Yeah.
$3,000 for that mocap is bullshit. I want a way bigger cut. Right. Or royalties. Right. Like I want a piece of the action, not just work for hire. So what games you're playing right now that you're excited about or having fun with?
I'm slowly weaning myself off of Call of Duty Warzone. I play the DMZ mode. I love it, but they seem to have abandoned that mode. Right? It's in maintenance now. Like they detach it from the battle pass, so there's like no real effort to level up. Anyway, so yeah, I'm weaning myself off of that, and then I suppose by the time this episode airs, I'll be playing Black Myth Wukong, that new game that came out.
Okay.
So the Journey to the West thing that came out looks amazing. And then probably after that, I think next month, it's only a couple weeks away at this point. Space Marine 2 is coming out, which is like a Warhammer thing. Which
right.
I don't know anything about Warhammer other than it's like big, huge dudes slaying aliens. So
right,
I'm going to play that one. It looks awesome.
What should have I asked you about but didn't? Like anything didn't come up?
Let's see. The state of the industry is like not super awesome right now. It's like 12,000 people out of jobs this year and everything.
Yeah.
I would maybe just my take for people out there is like, if you have a job, like maybe just hunker down. Maybe it's not like the thing you're looking to do at the moment, but just try to weather the storm for now, because it's really rough out there.
Right.
And then for people that are looking, like I said, everyone's got different circumstances, but it's time to get busy and start making things, right. Like, and even if you don't have an hour a day, like use that to try to advance your career, I guess, because the competition is really, really thick.
Yeah, definitely. Where can people find you online? Website, socials, stuff like that.
Yeah. So my personal Twitter or X, whatever, is just Alan Noon, one word. And that's more of like my personal thing. I post about arcade games and rock music and whatever. And you might see me complain about UGC here and there. Drill Creative is on all the different platforms. It's kind of dormant at the moment, but in a couple of weeks, it'll start spinning up because we're getting ready to prep something for release. So Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, whatever, it's all the same handle. It's Drill Creative, one word. So
Drill Creative, one word. Okay. Yeah, this might be coming out in a little bit. So yeah, it could be live, when this comes out. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, actually, there you go. That's one thing we could talk about is what I'm working on.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah. So now I brought it up. I'm probably not going to go into too big of specifics, but so I'm working on a project right now in UEFN, and of course everyone says this, right? But like, I really believe that we've got something different and unique. So very excited for that to come out. This was a project. I was like, oh, let me see if this will work. Like if I can get this one aspect to work and maybe this other aspect, then like, I think we can do this thing that's like super unique. And like, It came together pretty quick. I was like, okay, cool. This is going to be like 2-3 month project. We'll push it out. We'll see if people respond, whatever. But like, here we are now going into month 5 or 6 or something. So it's been incubating for a while. I really do. I think it's going to be very, very different and take people by surprise, because there's nothing like it on Fortnite or UEFN right now. So now, whether or not there's an audience for it, we'll see. But that's going to be exciting. So yeah.
No, that's great. And I'll have a link to Drill Creative, in the web show notes and all those kind of things. And we kind of touched on it a little bit, but just last question: what's one piece of advice you give others in the industry right now? Hunker down, work in your portfolio.
Yeah. I guess I already kind of touched on that. Just weather the storm. The video game industry is incredibly resilient, right? We've seen that over the years, the big crash back in the 80s, and then, there were slim years.
2008, 2009.
Right. Yeah. It'll come back around eventually, and maybe it looks a little bit different than it does today, but if you are employed, stay employed for the moment. And if you're not, I sympathize tremendously. I had already kind of had a plan of what I was going to do if I wasn't at Epic, but, for other folks, like, just get building, get creating, again, whatever time you can spare, like work on that portfolio, develop new skills.
Right.
Again, there's a lot of people out of work. Like, if you can network and get a small team together, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And even, again, like UGC is a great space for that,
Yeah,
you don't have huge teams. So start looking into it and polish your skills.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you, Alan. It's been great to catch up. It's been years since we've seen each other. And it's been nice to learn what you're up to.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks for having me on. This is awesome.